Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never imagined that a simple conversation about a wedding could end up being the most pivotal moment of my life. My fiancée, Eloise, had always been meticulous, the kind of person who planned every minute of her life with military precision. I admired her for it at first, but there was one day that made me truly realize just how strategic she could be. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and we were sitting in a quaint little cafe downtown, the kind with soft jazz playing in the background and the smell of fresh croissants in the air. She leaned across the table, eyes sparkling with excitement, and said something that stopped me mid-sip. "I want a prenup, Nathan," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I need to protect my future assets, and it has to be ironclad. No exceptions. Otherwise, the wedding's off." I remember laughing at first, thinking she was joking. Eloise could be dramatic when she wanted to be, especially when it came to money or organization. But the look on her face told me she was deadly serious. She pulled out a folder, thick with pages, and laid it on the table. The paper crackled as she slid it toward me, a kind of unspoken challenge in the way she presented it. I flipped through the document quickly, scanning all the clauses. There were sections about property, investments, savings, even intellectual property rights for her art projects. She had detailed scenarios for everything: what would happen if one of us inherited a family estate, what if we started a business together, even what would happen in the event of a global financial crisis. Every line was meticulously written, and honestly, I was impressed. "You really don't trust me?" I asked, trying to mask the nervousness I felt. Eloise smiled, a sly little grin that could disarm anyone. "It's not about trust. It's about precaution. Love is wonderful, Nathan, but money doesn't love anyone." I didn't hesitate. I signed the prenup that very afternoon. Not because I doubted her or doubted us, but because it felt like part of the journey we were choosing together. We shook hands over the contract, and I remember feeling a strange sense of respect, mixed with amusement at how seriously she had taken it. That was Eloise, always planning, always thinking 5 steps ahead. The next 3 years passed in a blur of wedding planning, career moves, and small domestic adventures. Eloise and I had built a life together, full of laughter, little arguments, and late-night talks about everything from mundane grocery lists to our wildest dreams. We traveled to Cornwall for our honeymoon, adopted a mischievous little Labrador we named Poppy, and settled into a comfortable rhythm that made the world feel like it was just ours. And then, one quiet Friday evening, while the sky outside was painted in shades of pink and orange, I bought a lottery ticket on a whim. It wasn't anything unusual. I occasionally picked numbers when I felt lucky, but that night, something felt different. Maybe it was the warm wind on my face, or maybe it was the sight of Poppy chasing her own tail in the garden. But I had this strange premonition that things were about to change. When the numbers were announced a few days later, I could hardly believe my eyes. The combination on my ticket matched every single number. $5 million. The amount seemed unreal, a figure so large it was almost a concept rather than a reality. I called my financial advisor immediately, went through all the verification steps, and finally, after what felt like hours, it was official. I was a multimillionaire overnight. The excitement was exhilarating, but also terrifying. I couldn't wait to share the news with Eloise. I imagined her reaction, her eyes wide, her hands over her mouth, maybe a little scream of disbelief. But as I dialed her number, my heart sank a little. I knew that money could complicate everything. We had a prenup, yes, but I had always assumed it would be a formality, something protective but never actually used. When Eloise picked up, her voice was cheerful, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. "Nathan, what's up? You sound different," she said. I took a deep breath. "Eloise, I won the jackpot. $5 million. Just like that." There was a pause. A long, pregnant pause that made my stomach twist. Then came the question I had anticipated but hoped wouldn't be so immediate. "$5 million?" she whispered, the excitement creeping into her tone. That's incredible. So, what does that mean for us?" It was the moment I had been waiting for, though I didn't realize how calm I would feel when it came. I simply pointed to the prenup, the very one she had demanded herself, every clause crafted to perfection. Eloise laughed nervously, then her laughter faltered as she reread the key sections. Her lawyer, who had joined the call for moral support, was speechless. Words were floundering in the silence, a mix of disbelief and frustration. I could almost see their jaws dropping through the phone. And in that silence, I realized something profound. Foresight, patience, and a little trust in the unexpected could change everything. I hadn't acted out of spite or greed. I had honored the agreement, the very rules she had written herself, and now the game had shifted entirely in my favor. Eloise's reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief, the kind of face that freezes for a second before a storm of emotions hits. Her lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, fumbled with papers and legal jargon, but there was nothing he could say. Every clause had been meticulously drafted by Eloise herself, and the moment I pointed to it, the authority shifted entirely. I stayed calm, even as my heart raced a little, not from fear, but from a strange, satisfying sense of inevitability. You really can't claim anything," Mr. Caldwell finally stammered, eyes wide. "Nathan, it's all legally airtight. I don't even know what to say." I smiled politely, keeping my voice steady. "I signed it without hesitation, Eloise. You insisted on this prenup, and every clause is being honored exactly as written. That was your choice." There was a long silence on the line, punctuated only by the soft ticking of Eloise's wall clock in the background. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind as she realized the magnitude of what had just happened. She hadn't expected the lottery to intersect with the contract she had drafted herself. Her meticulous planning hadn't accounted for this twist of fate. In the days that followed, the tension between us was palpable. Eloise oscillated between admiration and resentment, her pride wounded, but her intellect grudgingly impressed. She had demanded control, and now, paradoxically, she was forced to accept the consequences of that control. Our conversations were strained, polite, but underneath it all, I could sense the subtle shift in our dynamic. I was no longer just her partner. I was a man who had outmaneuvered circumstances while honoring the very rules she had set. It was strange, almost surreal, to navigate this new reality. Friends and family were ecstatic for me, of course, congratulating me on my good fortune. But I was acutely aware that money changes everything, not just in terms of lifestyle, but in relationships, expectations, and perception. Eloise had thought she could protect herself, but she hadn't expected the irony of fate to intervene. And I, surprisingly, felt no guilt. Over the next few weeks, I focused on enjoying the windfall responsibly. I paid off debts, invested wisely, and even made plans for a modest expansion of our home. Eloise watched from a distance, initially silent, then slowly becoming more engaged in discussions about long-term planning. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor. Not a transformation, exactly, but a recognition that the man she had married was capable, calm, and decisive in ways she might have underestimated. One evening, a month after the jackpot win, we were sitting in the garden, the golden hour sunlight casting a warm glow over the backyard. Poppy was chasing her own shadow as usual, and I poured us each a glass of wine. Eloise turned to me, hesitant at first, then spoke, her voice unusually soft. "Nathan, I have to admit you played that well. I didn't expect—" She trailed off, searching for words. I chuckled lightly. "You set the rules, Eloise. I simply followed them. There was no game, no trick, just reality. Sometimes, the choices we make have consequences we don't anticipate." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a kind of quiet respect. Not the exuberant admiration she sometimes showed, but something deeper, almost like acknowledgement of competence and fairness. I realized that this wasn't about proving dominance or winning an argument. It was about the subtle understanding that life's unpredictability can intersect with careful planning in ways that force clarity and honesty in relationships. In the months that followed, things returned to a kind of balance. Eloise and I continued our routines, traveled occasionally, laughed at small absurdities, and celebrated quiet victories. But the story of the prenup and the jackpot became a defining moment for us. a reminder that foresight, patience, and the courage to honor agreements can protect you in ways that sheer luck or force cannot. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Life often tests us in unexpected ways. Eloise's insistence on a strict prenup could have felt controlling or mistrustful, but instead, it became a shield that allowed me to navigate fortune responsibly. The irony, of course, was not lost on me. She had demanded protection for her future assets, yet the very structure she insisted upon ensured that she could not claim what fate had chosen to grant me. And in that realization, I found a kind of satisfaction that goes beyond wealth. It's the clarity that comes from acting honorably, following through on promises, and understanding that sometimes the rules we set for ourselves, or for others, carry consequences we never fully imagine. I didn't gloat. I didn't flaunt my winnings. I simply honored the contract, and in doing so, honored the agreement between two people who had chosen to trust each other in the only way they could at that moment, through foresight, legality, and a little bit of faith in the unexpected. Eloise and I never spoke about dividing the jackpot again. The prenup had done its job and life went on, not perfectly, not without occasional tension, but with a sense of quiet equilibrium. And sometimes, when I watch Poppy chase her tail under the fading sunset, I think about that Tuesday in the cafe, about the folder of papers, and about the strange, beautiful intersection of careful planning and sheer luck that changed everything. In the end, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the rules, the respect for them, and the subtle power of foresight in a world that rarely waits for anyone. And that, perhaps, was the real jackpot.